Hello, and welcome to the third installment of Lands of Legend. I am author J.K. Knauss, and I'm going to take you on a guided tour through the beautiful exotic places that appear in my epic medieval novel, Seven Noble Knights. It's a trip through medieval Spain. So in the last installments, we saw Don Gonzalo, the father of the Seven Noble Knights, making a really difficult and treacherous journey south from the land he knows into the Caliphate of Cordoba. He's finally come to the end of his journey. He is now in the capital of Cordoba. And this is the kind of thing he sees within the city once he crosses through that city wall. He's got whitewashed walls, narrow twisting streets, and lots of shade. I really think that it probably looked a lot like this in the 10th century without the electric lines, of course. And obviously it still looks like this today. I took the photo on the left when I was studying in Cordoba before I had a digital camera. The people of Cordoba today are still fascinated with the idea of a private interior patio with nothing visible from the street, but decorated with tiles and plants. This is a direct legacy of Muslim architecture and appreciation for engineered natural spaces. They have a big festival with a contest every year to see who can have the prettiest patio. So you might say that the interior patio is an oasis in the desert of the city. Don Gonzalo doesn't get to see any of these because they are closed off to the public until people let you in. But finally, he snakes through the narrow streets, and they open out onto the Great Mosque. It is currently 24,000 square meters, which is 258,000 square feet. At the time of Don Gonzalo's visit, it would have been 2/3 the size it is now, which is still plenty close to infinite, in my opinion. There are conveniently some people down here, so you can get a sense of the proportions. And it's not only enormous, it's also finely decorated, as you can see, with the red arches and the geometric tracery. This is probably what this part of the building looked like in the 10th century, minus the darkening that you see from pollution. They do clean it every once in a while. So if you notice these windows right here, these are known as jalousie windows, and they were popular all over Spain in the north as well as the south. So I'm pretty convinced by this picture. You enter the Mezquita today, as Don Gonzalo does, through the Orange Patio. This bell tower would have looked totally different, and it would have been a minaret. The Orange Patio is so named for the geometrically placed trees that provide a pleasant space for the faithful to wash in the large basins before entering to worship. Don Gonzalo fumbles his way through here and catches a glimpse of the interior. It would have probably been a lot brighter in the Middle Ages because they have put walls in where there used to be a really, really large jalousies that let in much more light. Today, the Mezquita has 856 columns made of marble, granite, and jasper. And it would have looked a lot like this in the 10th century. I tried to communicate the way this place fills me with wonder in the book. And poor Don Gonzalo is bewildered, seeing so many things he's never imagined before. But he's in the wrong place. Luckily, someone who speaks a version of his language directs him to the palace city of Medina Azahara, just a few more Roman miles up the road. Medina Azahara was razed to the ground just a half a century after Don Gonzalo's visit. The archaeological site is visitable and under constant study. These are just a few of the restored arches of the last of 3 monumental gates at the entrance to the palace complex. These were designed to really impress all visitors and maybe instill a little bit of terror in their hearts as they approached the grandeur of this palace. I'd like to read a few paragraphs from chapter 8. Before Gonzalo towered 14 archways in the red and white pattern he recognized from the mosque, 3 times the height of a man, mesmering in their regularity and awe-inspiring in their reach for the clear blue sky. The central archway was higher than the others, and as Gonzalo watched, men in turbans flowed out of it, while a line was forming behind the first man, trying to get inside. He had been stopped by another guard, who glanced at a parchment, took his weapons, and spoke at length before waving the traveler through. Gonzalo jumped down from his horse and held it by the reins, making the arches seem even taller, and remained spellbound, unaware of the passage of time before he became the first in line. He nodded to the guard, who maintained a creased frown. Gonzalo unfolded his letters for the muscular guard to see his importance as envoy of his brother-in-law. A rush of disconnected sounds came out of the guard's mouth. Gonzalo shook his head. "I don't know what you're saying." "I'll take your horse and weaponry. You go through this gate, Celie." Gate, thought Gonzalo. If this was a simple gate, what were the wooden entrances to the chicken coops in Salas? He took the dagger and sword out of the sheaths on his belt, folded his parchment back up, and walked through, ducking his head as if he were entering a cathedral. Now he was confronted with more passageways that seemed to be half indoors and half outdoors. A sliver of sunlight gleamed on the smooth stones that showed the way in and out of secret corners and routes that led who knew where. And excuse my little fumble there, I was trying to say mesmerizing. Here we can see the gate from the other side. Medina Azahara is built on several levels up the hillside, with gardens and reception halls on the lower levels, and living quarters for people of different ranks on the others. Looking out from here, the horizon is infinite. In the 10th century, there was a good road leading directly from here to Cordoba, and it was illuminated at night and everything. I'm pretty sure that's the direction we're looking at here. This is the site of the mosque at the palace. The last time I visited here, the guide said something about the archaeologists having to really fight for the right to dig in this area, because this is prime fighting bull territory, and those ranchers did not want to let go of the land, but thankfully they finally did get their hands on it. It's an ongoing project, this dig. I found this mock-up of what the mosque would have looked like from the outside. See, here you can see the palace walls. It's like a city. Don Gonzalo does visit the outside of this mosque during his stay here, but not quite yet. On his first day, he's led through a place to wash up and a place to eat some strange but delicious food after his journey. And then here, this is the most restored part of the site, and it's the reception hall, built to further impress foreign visitors. Here, Al-Mansur is holding court, listening to requests and making decisions. Here I'd like to read another excerpt from the same chapter, chapter 8. His guide rushed him through the garden he hardly had time to glimpse, straight into an airy hall. 2 rows of red and white striped arches, supported on alternating black and salmon-colored marble columns, divided the space into 3 equal oblong chambers. They stopped in the first chamber, where countless men, fragranced with what were most likely expensive resins, sat in rows along the walls, conversing or waiting quietly. The guide gestured to an open space, which Gonzalo took to be an invitation to sit down. As the guide disappeared, he folded his legs in imitation of the other men. Their robes were a rioting contrast of colors and stripes of which he couldn't guess the meaning. Nearly all of them wore turbans, and his hands went to his scalp, feeling oddly exposed. But then he guessed they were all equal, while they sat there shoulder to shoulder, waiting an audience for Al-Mansur. He had taken the last available space along the wall, so he wondered how many days he would have to wait. Not that it would be disagreeable, even though he understood nothing of the low, serious-toned conversation around him. He imagined spending days staring at the lobed column capitals, at the marble walls sculpted in minute detail to create leaves, vines, and trees in every available space. Aside from the entrancing color contrast, with the deepest red yet, Gonzalo reckoned the archways must be made of sandstone to create such fine arcs and whorls. From his position he couldn't quite see past the columns into the next chamber, but he guessed that craning his neck or getting up to look wouldn't be a favorite activity. His only remaining desire was that Sancha could see it too. He shook his head, trying to describe it all for her. The man seated next to Gonzalo was staring at him. He was sitting up straight as a rod, balancing a sand-colored turban on his head and a ring on each finger, but his black eyes slanted downward into the newcomer's face. "This is my first time in Cordoba," Gonzalo said, by way of friendliness. "Clearly," replied his companion. This is an aerial photo of the archaeological complex. You can see the reception hall right here. This is the mosque outside the wall. The entrance gates are casting a shadow right here. And these amazing walls, which I have not seen from the outside myself. And Don Gonzalo stays here for quite some time. And this is where we will make the transition to part 2 of Seven Noble Knights. In part 2, we meet a new hero. He is the 8th son of Don Gonzalo. Mudarra is a young, powerful warrior who was raised in the luxury and refinement of the capital of the Caliphate of Cordoba during its period of greatest splendor. When he finds out that his life was intended for bloody revenge in a distant land, he is eager to meet his father and his destiny. With his friend by his side, he rides north to change his religion and take on the burden of revenge while he struggles with doubts about the reasons for it. So now we get to head north with Mudarra, and we get to see the north as if for the first time through our new hero's eyes. The north is beautiful in a more mountainous, less cultivated way. This is a town called Frias in the province of Burgos. And in the north there are narrow, twisting streets too, but the buildings are different colors than in the south, and different shapes. One of the first places Mudarra visits is, of course, Salas, which is now called Salas De Los Infantes, after the 7 noble knights. This is the town hall in the main square. Off to the left, we actually have the Dinosaur Museum, so don't forget to visit the Dinosaur Museum when you're in the region of Larda. And this is the town crest of Salas De Los Infantes. It is based on a painting on a casket that they found in the wall of the church during renovations way back in the 1500s. The casket was claimed to contain the remains of the 7 brothers and their tutor. And you can see how the story is laid out right here. We've got the 7 brothers around the rim, got Mudarra, and Don Gonzalo being reunited in the middle. It is the story from the perspective of the good guys. This is the church where the casket was found. The remains have been transferred into a new casket, which I learned was last opened for public viewing in 1974, 1,000 years after the town's founding. I have a couple of blog posts about that adventures that I've had in Salas, which I will link to in the video description. From here, Mudarra is convinced that he needs to go to Busto de Bureba, where Doña Lambra, the big baddie, has her estate. He wants to learn more about his enemy. Today, it's a very small town with an enormous church, as usual, and it's perched on a hill with views to the valleys and then the mountains beyond. Here, Mudarra camps out in secret, doing reconnaissance, and meets a most unexpected character, and I think this is a really good place to stop and tune in for part 4. It will probably be the last part. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions, be sure to put them in the comments or contact me on any other social media. See ya for part 4.